I can hear you.
All right. So, hello. My name is Simon Duran, and I am with the Unsung Heroes Living History Project. Today, we are honored to speak with David Smith, a veteran of the U.S. military. And this project preserves the stories of local African American veterans whose service and lives helped shape their families and our community. Um, Before we begin, I'd like you to confirm that you have signed, or I guess in case you're going to sign, the release granting the Unsung Heroes Living History Project, a 501(c)(3) nonprofit organization, permission to record and use this interview as outlined in the release of deed or gift.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So let's just begin. Um, Please, I guess to start, could you tell us something about yourself and your life before the military?
Before the military, my father was a he's a retired Army E7 sergeant first class, I believe it was, and he was also he's also a pastor. So we moved between America and Germany, and not any other country, but between the United States and Germany since I was born. So I've been over to Germany three times before I actually graduated high school in Germany, Saarbrücken, Germany, in 1991.
Okay. Um, I guess then, what were you doing when you joined the military? And
So, so after I graduated high school in Germany, we came back to the United States, and I went to school in Savannah, Georgia, and I went to Armstrong State University, which changed to Armstrong Atlantic State University, and now it's something I think it's Georgia Southern. But and I did that from 91 till I came into the military in 97. Um, the I was initially going to school full time, and then I got I had to start depending on myself, and I started working. And then by the time 96 came around, I was working full time and not going to school. So I knew how to do something else with my life and not go back home. And that's why I came into the military.
okay.
Mhm.
Um, let's move on then. Can you describe your first days in boot camp or training?
So yes, but I think my experience it might be similar to other ones, but my dad was a drill sergeant in the army, so
Mm,
I was already kind of used to getting yelled at. And he was a pastor, so I was getting yelled at from for different reasons, for different. So I just took it. Um, I already knew what to expect because I was kind of already groomed in a way before I went into the military. So I just kind of helped other people. Like so other people were kind of crying. There's grown dudes. Well, at the time they're grown dudes. I came in when I was about 20, 22, 23 years old. So there was people there who was like, 18, 19, 20, who had never been away from home ever. And they got somebody yelling at them and trying to force them to do, you know, fall in line. So basically, it became camaraderie in the beginning, trying to help people get over the bad stuff. Because I didn't think it was easy, but also didn't think it was that hard. I mean, if you just follow what they told you to do, you can get through it. So,
yep. What was the biggest adjustment for you?
hmm, it's gonna seem kind of weird, but by the time I had come in, I wasn't eating that much and I was starting to lose weight. So when I came into the basic training, they gave us 3 square meals a day. Even if you didn't have much time to eat them, I was still getting fed. So I actually gained weight while I was actually in basic training.
Okay.
Almost like they're forced, almost like they're force feeding me. I'm like three meals a day. I, I wasn't doing that much. I was really at my I was working before I came in the military. Right before I came in the military, I was working literally 50, 60 hours a week. And that was just to break even. And I'd have a little bit of money left over for food and gas. So I knew that wasn't the life where I was working so much just to make ends meet and not really, I didn't save anything. Um, I was eating when I could. But when I came in the military, that was the biggest adjustment for me, really, because I got some money where have, I can eat. And that wasn't even a thing you paid for in basic training. That was just given.
Mm.
I was just able to eat. So I was desperate. I'll put it that way.
Okay. Um, what was your military occupation or specialty, and did you choose it or was it assigned?
So both. Um, I had high enough ASVAB scores where I can pretty much choose a lot of different options. And so they presented me at the time where there was open. They presented me with a couple of different options, and I went with um, uh, they call it air launch missile maintenance, working in space and missile systems career field. So under the air launch missile maintenance, I was actually a cruise missile um, technician. So not the ICBM side of the house, which was the other side. So there was in the Air Force there was a shred out, um, 2MO, and I was a 2MO, which is a missile. The M is for missiles, right? And I was at X1B, which meant the B was a cruise missile shutout. They had 2MO X1A, which was the ICBM maintainers, and it was the electrical side of the house for them. So I was a 2MO X1B, and I did cruise missile maintenance. The cruise missiles that go on the B-52s is what my focus was on. And I was at Barksdale Air Force Base for that. At the time, they had cruise missiles also at Fairchild Air Force Base and Minot Air Force Base. They closed up a couple other bases. So by the time I came in, those are the three main bases that they had cruise missiles at. So,
Let's see. Where were you stationed and what stands out most about those places?
so I did cruise missiles as my initial get in the Air Force job at Barksdale. And then I signed up to they were telling people to get out, become a recruiter, or become an instructor. So I was selected. I was one of the first person to be asked, "What do you want to do?" And I said, we're going to become an instructor." So I came here to Vandenberg Air Force Base. That was Air Force Base at the time, in 2000 to become an instructor to teach cruise missile maintenance. So I did that for 4 years at Vandenberg here. And while I was doing that, some of the people that I work with were transitioning over to the newly formed launch group, in which the Delta 4s and Atlas 5s out on South Base were being developed and starting to launch out of there. So the new launch group um, needed people. And it just so happened that when I got done with my cruise missile maintenance time teaching it, that they needed bodies over to do mission assurance at the launch group. So I went over to the launch group. Still, I mean, to the launch group out on South Base where I was at Slick Six for the Delta 4 mission out there doing mission assurance, um, from 2004 to 2008. And so I think we did two missions out there that launched out of that pad before they decided to refurbish it. And then I was asked to do quality assurance where I was doing QA for the launch group. So I was over Slick 6 and Slick 3, Space Launch Complex 3 and 6. Space Launch Complex 3 was launching Atlas 5s, and Space Launch Complex 6 was launching Delta 4s. And I was doing quality assurance for both of those pads for our military people. And then that took me up to 2010. In 2010, I needed a career change, and I was a tech sergeant at the time. I had made E5, and I said, okay. I always wanted to go back teaching since I taught from 2000 to 2004. Why not do something in the PME, which is the Progressive Military Education? And I got picked up to do Airman Leadership School at Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico. So from 2000 to 2014, I taught at the schoolhouse in New Mexico for the 4 years. Airman Leadership School is your first tier of training for the Air Force besides basic training. So after basic training, the next time you go to a formal, training school is Airman Leadership School. After that is your NCO Academy. And after that is the Senior NCO Academy. And then you have a Chief Leadership course to final that out. So I was teaching Airman Leadership School at Kirtland Air Force Base from 2000 to 2010 to 2014. And that's where that was one of my favorite jobs. Um, every 6 weeks, it was a 6 weeks course, and I'm teaching about 12 students a class, 8 to 12 students a class. And it was really neat to see all the different people from different career fields come, and they're the brand new airmen who are getting the brand new airmen to me, but they've been in for about 3 or 4 years, and they're getting ready to supervise somebody. And that's what you're teaching, how to be a supervisor for the first time ever, right, in your career. And it was really neat to watch, to see so many airmen come through, learn, and then go out there and prosper. A lot of students that I've taught got out, whatever, but they got the experience. But then I have some other students who stayed in. A couple of them became officers. A couple of them actually became chiefs. I had one that became chief this past year. I watched them. I mean, we developed a professional relationship where I'm sitting here like still mentoring them even after I left Airman Leadership School. And then to final out my career, I ended up being coming back here at Vandenberg and being the Space Launch Operations Manager. And that entailed managing a twice a year meeting with a 3-star general and bringing together the launch community for a 4 year launch schedule called the current launch schedule. And that's what you'll see on Spaceflight now is a managed, an agreed upon schedule between SpaceX, ULA, anybody who's launching on East Coast and West Coast ranges, including Wallops Island. I think we had Wallops Island on there as well. Um, Orbital was another launch company. We had to bring in NASA. So not just the booster, which is the bottom side, but also the satellite side, the top side. Anything else being launched had to come through basically me and my office. Um, and we put together a launch meeting twice a year to kind of like, hey, this is what's launching in the next 6 months, but also the next 4 years. And we made sure that we, finalize that. And the 3-star general would sign that paper. And that was the launch schedule, right? It doesn't go off in a vacuum. So that was my probably the most important job I had. Um, Probably the most fulfilling because after I had had the meeting, had to get the 3-star to sign off of it, and towards the end of my career, the general that I was doing this for was General Raymond. General Raymond ended up becoming a 4-star and also the first Space Force chief of, you know, chief of the Space Force, first general of the Space Force. Um, I have an EPR endorsed by him. I still have it in my closet where I keep my records. But I think every job I had its own importance. I mean, working on cruise missiles was about nuclear deterrence because it was nuclear weapons, but at the same time, there was a conventional side where some of the non-nuclear things was actually used in Kosovo campaign back in 2000, 2000, well, yeah, 2000, 1999, 2000, that something. So every job I had its own importance. That makes any sense.
Yeah.
Teaching students is important because you're the one that's holding the line to make sure that they know they learn something so they can go out and teach others. Um, Being in the launch side of the house, I was doing um, in very important missions, reconnaissance type of, missions for national security. Um, and yeah, so I had a very important career, if you want to call that, when I look at it, just talking to you. And during my time, all my EPRs, I keep all my performance reports. I was never marked down in my career. So all of my, I have my records still, and all of my records, there was no markdowns. I had, and then, there was a culture where like, oh, we shouldn't do, have everybody marked up. It's like, no, no, no. Well, not everybody was marked up. Some people actually got in trouble, right? I never once got Article 15, or a letter of reprimand or any of those things. I was not that I'm propping myself up. I'm just saying that's in my records. Um, but I never attributed that stuff to myself like I'm some kind of egomaniac. I attribute it because of the people who I was with and all the people who I served with. So, yeah. Did I answer your questions?
Um, yeah. Okay, I guess yeah, let's move on. Did you experience any challenges related to race during your service?
So it's a good question, and I think that I knew you're going to ask that question. Uh, it's hard to say.
Mm,
And the reason why I say that is whenever something would come up, as much training and as much support as I was getting, stuff was taken care of behind the scenes. And the reason why I say that is I had an incident where I was doing a particular task with a person who was a known racist at Barksdale. I was in Louisiana, and there was a guy who was a known racist, and they put me on a team with him to do a task where it was him and I were doing two-man, which means you had to have somebody else with you in order to do this task. You couldn't do it by yourself.
mm,
And this particular individual was supposed to be leading the task, but I had more experience. He was coming from another unit. I had more experience, but he was the one in charge of it. There was a call out for a particular type of fuel in it, and then inside of this instruction, it says you couldn't substitute it. He just wanted to get the task done, so he tried to substitute it. I says, "You're not going to substitute that."
mm,
He says, "You're going to follow orders." I said, the first order is that this technical data says you will follow this order, which is supersedes your rank, right? I didn't argue with him. I just told him that. And so because he had to have two-man, he couldn't do the task without me there. So I began to leave. So he had to shut the task down. As soon as we get to the front office, I inform a supervisor of the shift supervisor who was over everybody on that shift, and he basically pulled him off that task. He was decertified, right? So even though this guy was a known racist guy, whenever I spoke, a lot of times, no one argued. You get what I'm saying? So, and that kind of followed through because I've always relied back on instructions or something like that. I didn't allow myself to get upset, even though I might have been upset inside. I just called them out on this is what this says, this is what this says, this, and that's how I was able to um, push off some of that um, racism, if that's really what it was at that time, or naiveness or naivety, or whatever you want to call it. But um, that was early in my career, and that was my first duty station. Um, After that, I didn't see that too much, except for with some students who came from some backgrounds. And I think that with those students, and there's a couple of students in particular that were came out and said some things that they were a certain way. Um, with me being an example, it kind of allowed them to rethink. Well, wait a minute. And I remember another situation with a student, and he said we were having we didn't know he was racist or come from a racist background until we had this class about racism and diversity, oddly enough. And we were going through stereotypes. Now, everybody in that room, in that classroom, like 12 of us, 12 students, um, they all come from different backgrounds, some of them good, some of them bad.
Mhm.
This one in particular came from a town where he saw no minorities. He didn't see a Mexican. He hadn't seen a black guy. All of the information he got was from his school in West Texas, someplace wherever he was from. He and TV. So by the time he got to us, and he saw Mexicans, Hispanics, Asians, black people, his mind was already set that, oh, they're lazy or they're this because that's what they saw on TV.
Yeah.
So we're sitting in class and he's telling us what he thinks about everybody in the class, which was really interesting because the people in class weren't mad at him. Even though he was calling out and saying, well, you're a Mexican, I can't trust you because you're gonna steal something from me. And that's how he acted in the class. Like, why is this guy acting so strange? And so when we started talking with him, I didn't yell at him. I felt sorry for him, but I didn't feel sorry for him to where I'm gonna give him all this leeway. No, I felt sorry because he went through that in the past and that he doesn't have a clue. So now we're going to give him a clue, but not in a bad way, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so he didn't become one of my favorite students, but he had to change.
Yeah.
Because he said everywhere he went prior to Airman Leadership School, they would put him with other white people, which was a disservice to him and a disservice to everybody else. Um, I was the first black guy he had in charge of him, and he didn't know how he felt about that. And I'm like, the uniform comes first.
Yeah.
You, you need to get some things straight. Um, but he ended up not adjusting. He couldn't handle all of it. I followed him, and his first supervisor and his first supervisor chief, superintendent were all black, and he just couldn't adjust, so he only did one term. Right. That didn't affect my job.
Yeah.
I still kept it going. And guess what? That was one class of many where I had to deal with diversity and talking to different people about race and differences. Um, one of my favorite classes, believe it or not, was was a class of all white dudes. And here's why. They were so diverse. One of them was passing as a black guy, passing as a white guy. He was actually black. And when we start peeling the onion for each one of the, I think it was like 8 to 10 in that class, not a single one of them was really a white guy. Each one of them was something brought in from something else. And then each one of the backgrounds wasn't typical, white guy on the farm. None of them. No, there was half of them were freaking from the hood. Half of them were they got in trouble by law for doing drugs or doing something that was typical, black person things. None of them, none of them were your typical. Really, was a typical white guy who was, I'm in the church and I'm Catholic, and no, half of them were it. It was they were so diverse. It was like the most diverse class. As oddly as that sounds, a whole class full of white guys was my most diverse class. Diverse, more diverse than having male and females in there from different back. No, this one was hands down probably the most diverse class I ever had. So it was really, really strange. And I think that it's important that if you talk to people, you find out where they come from.
Yeah.
which is what I really learned in ALS is how different people are, and then how much you can get out of not get out of them, but what they bring to the table. Because everybody brings something different to the table, but you don't know about it until you start talking to them.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Um, let's see. Did the military provide a sense of unity or brotherhood that felt different from civilian life?
for me it did. We're all one. I think. How can I put it? Um, it's not about misery that loves company, but if you have um, a shared experience, good or bad, that becomes the person who you have the shared experience with. I think they call it trauma bonding or something like that. It's very similar to that, right? If I'm going through this and I'm going through this with you, then you and I have something to talk about because we we're both going through this thing together. Whether it's 2 people or 20 people or 30 people, we all went through it, right? Um, so when I did cruise missiles, it's a top secret job. There's not many of us doing it, and we're the only ones doing it,
Yeah.
right? So when I left that job, only us knew what happened in there. Only us knew what kind of maintenance we did and what was really happening. When you have that kind of experience, that becomes your partner.
Yeah.
Whether it's what I was doing, cruise missiles, or even if I was teaching, the camaraderie wasn't necessarily with the students so much as was with the instructors I was teaching with. We come back and the cadre was like, "Man, this was a hard day teaching. How do you teach this lesson about to this person, or how do you?" And so we have that shared experience. When I did uh, mission assurance for launches, guess what? There was only 3 or 4 of us doing that. In ULA, United Launch Alliance had a whole army out there, and those which tasks do we got to go out and see? So we had to go after Cat ones, which were the more important ones. Okay, well, there's only one me, and there's 2 people in electrical shop and 2 people in mechanical shop on our side. So I have to take the day shift, and he's had to take the night shift. So now we're working 12-hour shifts to make sure that we have a mission assurance over this launch processing. Guess what? We're the only ones that did it. We're the only ones that know what it looks like. Everything we did was top secret or behind the fence. So who do I talk to about that? I can't talk to nobody about that,
Mhm.
right? I could talk to him about some of the experiences, like, hey, I was up about 80 feet in the air, on the tower, doing some maintenance up there, up top, and I'm looking down, and I could see the ocean, and I could, and but as far as everything else that I was seeing, you know, so it becomes that kind of camaraderie where you're experience this, you're having this experience with these people um, that kind of carry you for the rest of your life. I'm still in touch with people who I retired with. We may not talk every single day. We don't have to. When we talk, you pick up as if we have been talking this whole time, right? So, um, and I do miss them. There was a couple of guys who my last job when we were doing the launch scheduling, managing that. Um, I was the launch scheduler sitting next to the range scheduling person.
Mhm.
And he and I were both enlisted. We were both E7s. He retired about a year after I did. He's still on the base. He was a space operations person, and I was a launch operations person. But when we got out the military, we swapped. So he's on the launch side doing that work. I'm on the space ops side doing space ops work. I didn't have the space ops work when I was in the military. I had launch operations. So um so there's some sense of camaraderie that we got just by the virtue of working side by side with other people. I think that's better.
All right. Um, what was the transition like when you returned to civilian life?
Wow, that's a good one. So every job that I had was stressful than the last. So by the time I got to my last job, I'm having to deal with NASA, FAA, both wings. At the time, we had um, Vandenberg and we had Cape Canaveral over there. The 45th and the 30th, we had to deal with both wings and their ranges and all their issues. We had to deal with space launch. Let's see, Elon Musk with the SpaceX. We had to deal with and bringing them up. There was so much stress that once I retired, I didn't realize how much stress I was under. I got divorced. The divorce couldn't handle all the stress that I was under. Um, and then I ended up going after a job that was way, way on the no stressful line. And I tried to make it stressful so I can have that level of stress that I was under. And it didn't need to be. And after I came down off of that stress high, um, I just kind of like, I'm not going to go back to that stress level again. Um, and I haven't.
Yeah.
There are stressful days at the job that I'm doing, but nowhere near where I was at. Right. So I think the transition for me was good because my health was affected by it. I mean, it's every after when I towards the end, after every major meeting, the very next day I have to set up for the next major meeting. It was nonstop. After this meeting was okay. We got to set the cycle up for the next one, and we got to start planning and having other meetings. I mean, the big meeting was the culmination of a dozen plus other meetings that led up to it, and the cycle kept going, right? And I'm the manager of that cycle. I got to start it. I got to initiate. I got to start this and keep it going. Um, I think that's so the job that I'm in now, and I don't know if you're going to ask about it later, but the job I'm in now doesn't have that cycle. It doesn't have has a bunch of mini ones that are all doing little things on their own, and they each have their own culmination point. Very, very small in nature. No, it's not a three-level venture, not three-star venture. I'm sorry, or have to bring in 3 stars here and a whole bunch of colonels. And we had to deal with Space and Missile System Center at the time, so there's another 3 star over there. And all these things get signed by 4 star ultimately. It yeah, it was a lot.
Mhm.
So to come off the transition was, and then I had authority. So even though I wasn't an officer, as a master sergeant in the Air Force, my job at the end was manager. That's literally a position. They have NCOSCs, they have flight chiefs, but I was a manager, right? And so if I didn't get what I needed to get, I could always get my officers that was over me to get it done for me. And if they couldn't get it done, I worked for a 3-star who could, right? I'm a contractor now, so I don't have any of those authorities. I got to do everything by personal influence. I don't have position authority anymore. Positional, I don't have any. I don't have that.
Yeah.
So I have to be creative
Okay.
and be nice to people.
Yeah.
Good.
So let's see. What are you most proud of from your time in the military?
Hmm. I'm proud of the people I work with. I
Mhm.
think that's what I think that's a good one. Hmm. I'm not done. I'm just it's kind of emotional.
Yeah. Let's see.
Yeah, that's the answer.
All right.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to a young family member considering military service today?
Hmm. If you're serious, go in and don't stop.
Mhm.
Go as far as go as far as you can go for yourself. I got to a part in my career where I had to make a compromise in order to keep going. I could either put my family off to the side and keep going and just follow what the Air Force, the military wanted me to do, which will put my family further in the back seat. Or I could choose my family and just let the career go. Even though when I got out, I let the career be done and I had to, get a divorce, but I still focused on my family. But there becomes a choice. And either the family's all in with you and they know that this is your job and they just have to suck it up with you. Um, but ultimately you go as far as you can go for yourself. Um, I think that's a big one. Because I was getting ready to get into a job where I had to go um, to a upper tier state like Minot, um, which is not a bad base. It's not a bad base. But because of where I was at, I would be taking a step down in position and doing something um, beneath my um, experience because I'll be switching from a cruise missile side of the house, having experience in space launch, to a big missile side of the house. And the culture within the career field is that you didn't start here, so you started at the bottom.
Yeah. Mhm.
And they didn't care. So then once I got up there, they would just keep me at the bottom because the career field culture. The career the career field had a certain culture where there was a hierarchy in jobs. Cruise missiles, no, first of all, yeah. So the 2MO community saw space launch basically at the bottom. You're not really doing any work. And really, we were watching others do work because we had experience from doing the jobs that we are doing in either cruise missiles or space launch. So this wasn't doing space launch was not a first term or a first job type of thing. It was what you did later. So it should have been seen as a step up. but the career field saw it as you're at the bottom. So they didn't give a lot of accolades to people in space launch. The next level up was cruise missiles. Oh, you're just working small missiles. You're not really doing a lot of work either. We're big missile side of the house, ICBMs, that's what they call them. And so that got more treatment. That got the high visibility things. And even with inside the big missile side of the house, there was even three other shred outs where it was electrical, mechanical, and facility maintenance. And they fought even amongst themselves about who was more important and get who gets more important accolades, etc. And that so the career field itself had its own issues, which is it wasn't necessarily racist, but it had its own diversity division.
Yeah.
That makes any sense. So you might as well have been racist, but it wasn't racist. It wasn't racist. It was more of a career field thing. Oh, you're cruise missiles. They're not saying, oh, you're black, but it's that kind of stigma that went with what kind of job you had within the career field. Oh, you're space launch. You're not doing anything. Yes, we are. It's kind of important what we do. I don't think you understand what we're putting up, right? They didn't care about what we were putting up, what we were actually doing mission assurance for. They had no clue, and they didn't care. So, yeah. Did I answer the question right?
Yeah. I guess next, how would you like your service to be remembered by future generations?
That every job is important, um, and that you can't do it alone. None of the jobs I could do by myself. It had to be a team of people. And
Mhm.
so I wouldn't I never would put myself out there and say that I did this and I did all those things. I did every job you had. I learned to put value in, and I put my own, you know, self into it and put my own fingerprint or touch. But that's what we all should be doing. And so if we're all doing it, that means it's a team effort. And so I think that um, there was somebody who coined the phrase "teamwork makes the dream work," and I think that's a really true statement. Yeah, I do. I see it. Um, how you doing, glorious husband? I think that it's more about teamwork than self.
Yeah. So,
Because there's no way I could do any of that stuff by myself, whether it was teaching, whether it was doing mission assurance or managing a launch schedule. None of that was me by myself at all. I attribute it to all the people who I had the privilege of working with. I mean, these meetings had 50 plus people, and they're all important, and they're all at the they weren't low airmen. These were leaders of their different sections. Um, FAA and NASA was there. We had a whole lot. I mean, I bring these names up, these different things up, but it was like 576 which was doing test launches out of Vandenberg. There's groups out of from Wallops Island, the also the Western Range folks that were there. So anything that launched and all the ranges that these things launched on culminated twice a year underneath this launch thing. So it was a team effort. Everything I did was a team effort. I don't want to say that it's my legacy that I did some crazy thing. I think it was a team. I couldn't, so I don't know. Everything I did was as a team thing.
okay.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to share before we close?
Uh, let's see. I think that every person, every person's career, um, it is ordered differently. No one's going to have the same career path.
Mhm.
I had a guy follow me, and I mean follow me when I got to Barksdale. I was there for a time, and then right before I left, he showed up, and he sort of took my spot. That's what people say. This guy followed you. He We had the same jobs for about two or three jobs, and every time I left a job, he would take my place, and even his path was different than mine. Even though he followed me, things that happened when he was there was different than things happened when I was there. When I was at Barksdale, I was met with the Kosovo campaign, and we launched several cruise missiles out on P-52s and let them go. I watched them fly out at Barksdale. I watched the planes fly out, and but that wasn't his experience. He didn't he didn't see those things.
Yeah.
When I was teaching at Airman Leadership School, um, no, also when I was teaching at cruise missiles maintenance, the year after I got there was 9/11. So the morning of 9/11, I come in the schoolhouse and find out that, hey, um, the trade center was hit. I went through that with the students. The guy behind me didn't, right? The guy behind me was actually at Barksdale, and they're on full alert because they don't know where this thing's coming from. So he's up there dealing with cruise missiles and watching these B-52s fly someplace they don't know where, but they're going to put them in the air. I was teaching, and then we had to shut down teaching for a week because we didn't know what the next attack was, right? So then I leave teaching, and here he comes. He's teaching while I'm up doing space launch. I'm experiencing these two launches that are happening. And then by the time I get done, he comes on board because he's done teaching. Now he's doing space launch, but there's no launches because now we're modifying the pad for a Delta 4 Heavy, which I never was able to see. Until this day, I have not seen the Delta 4 launch, the Delta 4 Heavy launch. But he was on the one that was the first one to see it. Is it? So everybody's career is different, even if it seems like it's closely aligned. You might do the same jobs in the whether you're in the Army, Air Force, Navy, um, compared to somebody else, but everybody's experience is a little bit different. Um, I really didn't experience full on racism as somebody next to me did. Right? I met somebody who came from Minot, and they had experienced some racism up there. Um, and then it was resolved because the Air Force didn't tolerate that. By the time I came around, the Air Force just stopped tolerating a lot of the racism and um, even sexism to a point, right? So um, they were going after people, but they didn't want that stigma on as a reputation for the Air Force. I think the Army still has some of that going on at Fort Hood, but and that's only because I have an aunt that lives down at Fort Hood, and she retired from the Army out of Fort Hood, and there were some things going on down there. Um, but as far as me dealing with it head on, blatant, I didn't see that as much. Not and virtually none directly, except for when I had to the stories I told you before.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that I think that's a positive thing, right? So, but it's what you make of it. And so, if you're hungry, you go out there and you eat. So, I was eating a lot, and what I mean by eating is I wanted to go work and be successful, and I just wanted to do the right thing. And whether I did it for the country or not, I didn't say, "Oh, I'm doing this for America." No, I did it because I got it. This is my job, and I want to keep eating, and I want to keep putting a roof over my head and support my family. And that's the way I did it. So, um, your reputation precedes you, and so you have to have keep your reputation always in the back of your head. Well, what am I presenting today? Um, and then people, lastly, I'll say this: people, I think, are generally good, but you don't know until you talk to them.
Mm.
I mean, I taught several hundred students in my life, and didn't know how good they were until you start talking to them. And I only met a small handful of what we would consider bad, and they really weren't bad. They came from bad experiences, and that's the result of how they, you know, turned out. So anyway, I
Well,
think
yeah.
that's it.
Thanks. Thanks. Thank you for sharing your story with us today. And your service and experiences are an important part of our community's history. And yeah, we are honored to help preserve them for future generations.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Not bad. And I'll send this stuff over as soon as we're done here.